when it comes to the community side, like you have those people and they show the example and like lead by example. Now on the corporate side, I'm kind of curious what it took to learn how to learn about the stakeholders and how to balance them, because I do personally have the experience of being loud enough to make a name and voice of myself inside the company where I worked previously, and then I think I can say it out loud that I failed miserably when it comes to talking to leadership, balancing stakeholders, and not because I said anything that was not true, but I didn't find the way to help people with the 100% corporate mindset to understand what I'm talking about, because they didn't have the open source experience. So when you talk about the values of open source, when you talk about that it's much more than just free software, when you talk about why not to fork something, or like why it is a bad idea to make changes in the middle of an open source project and not contribute it back. And even when the company made the mistake previously in a different project and they are doing it again and not realizing that they are doing the same thing, I still was not successful to tell them why it's not going to work. Like if you're doing the same thing, you will get the exact same outcome, no questions asked, and tried to explain it so many ways and didn't go through. And I was talked to in a not very nice way inside the corporate environment. I don't know if I would have been talked to the same way if I wasn't at that time young Hungarian woman. Maybe it would have been a little bit different, but at the same time, this balancing of stakeholders and balancing the open source and the corporate hat, because what the corporation wanted, I wasn't always comfortable bringing that to the community, because if you ruin your own trust, then you can't get anything done on from the practical perspective. And on the human side of things, like if something is not compatible with my own values, I'm not going to represent that, no matter whether or not it's part of the paid job. So like you push back, obviously, but it's really hard to push back in the corporate environment. And I do have the experience of how to fail, but I don't think I was able to get enough experience to figuring it out, how to actually make it work.
So my weird background is relevant here because I studied linguistics and anthropology before I got involved in open source. So one of the things that we do extensively is both understanding that different communities use different languages, and even if they're both English, like legal English is completely different than, like bikers English is completely different than, football players English is, like there's subsets of vocabulary. And then understanding the anthropology is kind of like extensive training in like realizing that people are coming from different contexts. They have a completely different bubble of background knowledge. Even though they may be using the same words, they may understand them completely differently. And sort of developing the skills to be like, one of the things we did is they just dropped us in with a Maasai tribe for 6 weeks to live with them and, kind of like figure out how to survive in a it's not just survive, but thrive and make friends, and like in a completely different cultural context with completely different background and completely different, like just like from scratch. It's like a really good way of challenging your assumptions. So when I got into open source, I already had that background, and that's what I brought into it. So I would say one of the first things you're dealing with there is a language clash. So what the company is saying and what the community is saying, so they might actually be saying the same thing. the way the company said it is completely different than the way the community said it. And you sitting there, you're constantly translating between the two because you have to learn both dialects. And you're constantly, when the company says something and you're like, oh no, that, I can't say that. You kind of have to break it down linguistically and anthropologically and figure out what is it that they're actually trying, like what is it they actually need here? What do they care about? What do they not? Like, I know they said that thing, but is that actually what they meant? And I kind of like break it down to its like spare part, like base components. And then what you say to the community is what actually matters in a way the community can actually understand. And you may even have to explain some background about, oh, well, we had this customer and they had this problem. This is like actually help the community understand, and vice versa. Like sometimes you find yourself to the company explaining, oh, well, this is what this project has been through before, and this is why this matters, and this is why that matters, and this is like why that particular thing won't work in here. So part of it is just a translation. Part of it is also really fundamentally anthropology. It's like you're dealing with alien tribes from another planet who just do not understand the other. And once you realize that, it actually helps. When you realize that, like I don't really feel like I'm part of corporate culture. Sometimes I don't even feel like I'm part of the community culture. Sometimes I do. It depends on the community. Different communities I feel more or less at home in. But just kind of like, I don't know, doing that cultural analysis and kind of like understanding how the system functions and what the values are and how those values work and where they break down. And, like that really helps. So I kind of had all of that, and that got me through at least a decade. And then another thing that I found really helpful was, as part of my master's degree, I did some straight up business technical strategy and management courses. And the reason that helped is not because I learned anything new. It's because I did the courses using all open source projects as my examples. The professors thought that was great because all my work was like a field they didn't know anything about. But I basically took all the business words and explained open source projects in those business words. It's just words. It's just language, right? But like sort of like I was like doing a translation error exercise as a business assignment, business class assignment. And that I found really helped me kind of level up in terms of how well I was able to explain things to companies. Because a lot of it, like even using the word stakeholders, I never would have used the word stakeholders before. All stakeholders means is people who care about a thing or have an interest in it or need something out of it, or there's a lot like, but it's like a shorthand that like you find the right word, then people sometimes like people with a somewhat corporate background can like that one word encapsulates a huge amount of knowledge, and then you can say things much more quickly and easily in a way that they will understand. So I found that really helpful.
Is your thesis available somewhere? I would love to read it.
It is. My master's thesis was actually on OpenStack. It was on OpenStack community collaboration values. That's what I did a survey across OpenStack companies involved in OpenStack around what mattered to them and like sort of what their values were and what sort of things they were doing to improve their participation or like get more value out by putting more value in, sort of like all those like concepts.